Thierry Henry did what nobody else could. This is quite a funny statement, because there are two camps of reactions from two types of people that question inspires. The first camp is people who have no clue who Thierry Henry is and have no idea what I'm talking about. Believe it or not, those do exist. The second camp is those who know exactly who he is, but because his list of feats, achievements, and accolades is so long, they have no idea what it is specifically that I'm talking about.
Back again to Thierry Henry! What a goal! It's Henry! He scored! He scored for Arsenal! Sharp challenge, Henry shot 1-0.
Another extraordinary goal from Thierry Henry.
The Frenchman was and is a one-of-a-kind player and personality. The gloves, the finesse, the resolve, he won everything, he played everywhere, and if you ever saw this man on the opposing team sheet, you knew you were in for a very, very long day. I thought today would be a good day to look back at the career of the great man to remind ourselves just how much of an animal he truly was. So, with that being said, how good was Thierry Henry, really? Yo, what's going on everyone? Hope you're all doing well. I'm Tinashe and welcome back to yet another Football Iconic video. Off the bat, I'm gonna be upfront with you guys. Thierry Henry is my favorite player of all time. He just about entered his prime around the time that I really started getting into football and understanding players, positions, and all that stuff. And I'll never forget the gloves. Regardless, as always, I'm gonna do my very best to make sure this video is unbiased, and also this video is timestamped so you can skip ahead to whichever points you really want to watch. Also, this video is sponsored. If you're a lover of fantasy football and you're a watcher of this channel, you probably already know what's coming next. Happy to say that this video was sponsored by the good people over at Spitch. If you don't know by now, Spitch is a daily fantasy football manager that pits you against your mates, family, or members of your very own football community. Each match week, you can create a brand new squad in one of many fully licensed popular football leagues and compete for cash prizes. The game makes use of an in-depth stats system to track performances, and as of the 22-23 season, a brand new season mode feature has been added. In this game mode, managers select a new lineup each match day, and your best 5 matches throughout the season will count towards your final ranking. With all that in mind, right now is the best time to go ahead and download Spitch using the link in the description. And if you're so inclined after that, you can use the one below that to join my community, the Iconic League. Once again, cheers to Spitch for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to it. Thierry Henry's story began back in 1977. He was born in Paris as the son of 2 immigrants that hailed from French territories in the Caribbean islands. Despite growing up in Les Ulis, a Parisian commune seen as a bit of a rough area, the football facilities available to him were more than good enough to see him develop into a fine young player. Henry was good, and he always had a great football brain on him, it seems. But more than anything else, it was his father that instilled within him the work rate that took him to the top, ensuring he was always training and always working. To say that my dad pushed me is an understatement. I was never naturally drawn to football. Those are Henry's own words. It's hard to tell to what extent young Thierry enjoyed the pressure that was put on him. When you're a kid, it's never easy to tell why your seniors are telling you to do certain things, but what we do know is that pressure definitely yielded dividends. By 13, he had been moving around from one club to another, but this is where things began to shift. Monaco sent scouts out to watch him play, and when he scored all 6 in a 6-0 win for his club at the time, he essentially forewent any need for a formal trial. As per the suggestions of the scouts, Henry went on to take a course at the very prestigious Clairefontaine Academy in 1992. Only opened in 1988, this academy was one of the French Football Federation's ways of providing high-quality elite training to youth aged 13 to 15. Everything from physical to technical to mental, the institution did well in equipping young players with what they need. And the only reason I'm going on about it is because their list of graduates is quite a heavy one. Nicolas Anelka, Abu Dhabi, Kylian Mbappe, William Gallas, Olivier Giroud, Henry himself, the list goes on. Anyway, once done and dusted, he finally joined Monaco and made his pro debut in '94. 17 years old. Interestingly, according to Henry himself, the only thing he possessed at that point was speed, basic ball control, balance, and not much else. However, what set him apart was that he could run at full tilt with the ball at feet while maintaining control, a skill you'd be surprised how few fully fledged professionals have. So when he went to Monaco, he was understandably first put on the wing to test things out. But little did he know, based on connections alone, the path to ultimate legendary status was already clearing up for him. His coach at the time was none other than Arsene Wenger. Although at that point, Henry had been at the club for a few years, they were only together for a few weeks following Henry's promotion to the first team. As was the case, following a poor start to the season, Wenger was dismissed. In any case, despite putting him on the wing himself, Wenger believed that Henry had what it took to become a top striker. He just wasn't ready yet. He went on to develop really well at Monaco. Between 94 and 98, he scored 28 goals in 141 games across all competitions. He won the 96-97 French Division trophy and the 96-97 Division 1 Player of the Year. And there was also the small achievement of being included in France's 1998 World Cup squad at the last minute, being his country's top scorer with 3 goals and winning the tournament on home soil. France's first ever World Cup win. As I said, a small achievement. Having announced himself on the world stage in extravagant fashion, the now 21-year-old was on course for a big move in the coming months. And with Arsene Wenger flying extremely high, having just won his first Premier League and FA Cup double with Arsenal, the reunion of dreams was now on the cards. So, Juventus was up next, when Monaco doubled Henry's asking price following his fantastic World Cup, pricing Arsenal out of contention. A fee of about £10.7 million, and a move that absolutely did not work out as planned. At face value, this was a tremendous move. Juventus were also high flyers, winning back-to-back leagues, making deep runs in the UCL, plus compatriots Didier Deschamps and Zinedine Zidane were also plying their trade there. Unfortunately for our boy though, his timing was just very off. Extremely successful and loved coach Marcelo Lippi resigned from his role about 2 weeks after Henry arrived. In his place came Carlo Ancelotti, a world-renowned coach, as we all know. However, as Juventus fell on hard times, slipping to 7th that year, the rigid defensive setup Ancelotti employed just did not gel with Henry. Being played as a right wing-back at times or a right midfielder with little license to use his explosive qualities was just not working out. And on top of all of that, he reportedly fell out really hard with Juventus' managing director at the time, Luciano Moggi, who himself hasn't been shy of controversy in the past. All of the above contributed to his ultimate exit from the club only 7 months after he arrived. But it was reportedly his differences with Moggi that really pushed him over the edge. Otherwise, the story of Henry and this very video could have been a very different one. Up next was Arsenal. In August of 1999, Arsenal ended up paying more than Monaco's initial asking price that made them lose out on Henry the first time around. And it was a transfer that was certainly met with controversy. First of all, £11 million, a club record fee for a player that was perceived to be massively underperforming at his previous club. Second of all, they lost Nicolas Anelka to Real Madrid, the previous campaign's Young Player of the Year and the previous campaign's top scorer for the club. And third of all, Henry only scored 2 goals in his first 14 games in all competitions. It certainly wasn't the greatest start, but after those 14 games, the man's career just went into overdrive. Take a look right here. This is a chart of Henry's league goals scored per year by 1999 at 22 years of age. It's not that much to look at, right? Here is that same chart for the 10 years that followed. It's looking a little bit better, right? And the green over here, this is the same chart but for assists. This visual is honestly quite remarkable, isn't it? So how does this happen? How does a guy that is just a run-of-the-mill speedy winger with a not all too inspiring end product turn into this? Which is to say, and I'll be repeating myself, the greatest player in Premier League history, in my opinion. I guess it comes down to a few things, the most visually obvious being a shift from the wing to the center of the park. As I mentioned earlier, Wenger has said on multiple occasions that since his youth days, he always saw Henry as a striker in the long term. That shift was made official immediately upon his arrival in the Premier League, but it wasn't easy to adjust. He of course hadn't consistently played up front since his youth days. I've literally had to go back to school and be retaught everything about the art of striking, to rediscover the scoring instinct, that automatic reaction in front of goal. That quote from the midway point of his first season does well to explain the initial barren spell and gives us a glimpse of the hard work that he must have put in. So I want to stay on the topic of switching positions for a bit, because in the case of Henry, there's a lot to unpack. As with all of these videos, when I was doing the research for this one, along with the books, articles, and other footage to review, I also tried to look for podcasts on the subject to get little tidbits of information, one of which was Jamie Carragher's first ever episode of The Greatest Game. Highly recommended, by the way. He's since stopped recording the pod in mid-2021, but the episodes available are quality. Anyway, in this episode, Thierry Henry alludes multiple times that he never truly saw himself as a natural goalscorer, even, funnily enough, specifying that Ruud van Nistelrooy is more of a goalscorer than him. This is in spite of the fact that in the 5 years that they were both competing neck and neck for the Golden Boot, Henry came out on top 4 times. Instead, he always viewed himself as more of a hybrid of all the major attacking positions than anything else. Fast and tricky enough to tear down the wing and provide the final ball to the man in the center. Composed enough to go way deep, collect the ball and play make. Ruthless enough to finish off the attacking move regardless of how the ball is delivered to him. Apart from, admittedly, not the greatest ability in the air for an attacker standing at 6'2", he was the definition of a complete forward. Also, I skipped over this bit earlier, but even after he moved over to a central position at club level, he was still starting out wide for his country for a while, and quite successfully at that. Henry and France followed up the 1998 World Cup with a win in the 2000 Euros, where he again finished as France's top scorer with 3, and also was named man of the match 2 separate times. In the middle, out wide, in deep, as the youth say, the man was simply built different. Due to all of this, it is extremely difficult to find someone to compare Henry to. However, depending on who you ask, there is one. Now, I'm completely aware that these are 2 completely different players with 2 different skill sets and that their primes definitely didn't overlap. I'm also well aware that there is probably somebody in the comments that's going to be irrationally offended by what I'm about to say. But there are only 2 players in the history of the top 5 leagues that have scored 20 or more goals and assisted 20 or more goals in a single season. That's Thierry Henry and Lionel Messi. 02-03 for Henry, 19-20 for Messi. Again, 2 completely different players, but that stat line is very telling. Of course, all of this was not an individual effort. For this guy to be able to play in his free-flowing hybrid role, his team had to be on board. Dennis Bergkamp is a good example of this. Once Henry became the main guy, Bergkamp had to trust in him and be completely comfortable with being a secondary player, so to speak. There are obviously more examples of this scattered across the team, but I'm sure you get what I mean. And side note for later, this was not the last time that this notion would come into play in Henry's career. Over the years, the goals that this guy was scoring for Arsenal and the way he was moving was just nuts. With him up top, Arsenal picked up 2 Premier League titles. This included the fabled and never repeated Invincible season in 2004, as well as 2 FA Cups. Okay, so at this point, I've spoken at length about just some of the reasons that explain how he achieved what he did at Arsenal. So I think now is as good a time as ever to curate a list that explains what he achieved, and also elaborate a little bit further on what exactly it is I mean by the title of the video. Thierry Henry spent 8 seasons in England between 1999 and 2007. All in all, he played 377 games for them and scored 228 goals, making him Arsenal's top scorer of all time. In the league, those stats read 175 goals in 258, which is also an Arsenal record. For 5 straight seasons between 2001 and 2006, he scored no less than 24 goals in the league, 4 of which were Golden Boot winning years, which is the record for most Golden Boots won by a single player. And I'd like to remind everyone once more that he was only 1 goal away from making it 5 in a row. He shares the record for the most assists in a season with Kevin De Bruyne, 20. He holds the record for the most Football Writers Footballer of the Year awards, 3. He shares the record for the most Premier League Player of the Season and Players Player of the Year awards, both being 2. And just in case you're wondering, he came agonizingly close to a Ballon d'Or at several points, particularly in 2003, for reference, the Messi-like season where he came second, and 2004, the Invincible season where he somehow came 4th. Now, I personally think he should have won both, but then again, I am biased. The 06-07 season was uncharacteristically disappointing for Henry. Although he did put up 10 goals in 17 appearances, a handful of injuries meant he missed out on the majority of the season. Going into that 06-07 season, Arsenal and Henry had just come off a disappointing loss in the Champions League final to Barcelona. This, understandably, is a trophy that he'd always wanted but that he hadn't won just yet. He'd come close before, obviously the aforementioned Champions League final in 2006, but also a semi-final with Monaco in 98. In an unexpected turn of events, our guy must have thought, if you can't beat him, join him. 2 seasons later, he was a Blaugrana in a €24 million deal. Okay, but in all seriousness though, prior to his exit, Henry was very vocal about the fact that he wasn't so sure about Arsenal's way forward at that point in time. David Dein, the long-term vice chairman of the club, left his position after a disagreement with his fellow board members. In the wake of that bombshell, Arsene Wenger, a huge fan of Dein in the club's hierarchy, was also heavily considering a departure, even later admitting in the years to come that he probably should have left the club there and then. Dein was the one who appointed him in the first place, after all. Unfortunately and understandably, Wenger has said that at this moment, he will not commit to the club past the expiration of his current deal, which finishes at the end of the coming season. I respect his decision and his honesty, but I will be 31 at the end of next season, and I cannot take the chance to be there without Arsene Wenger and David Dein. So I think it's safe to say that all of this was a driving factor in his decision. But also, it's Barcelona. If the most recent summer 2022 transfer window tells us anything, players will always want to play for Barcelona. His first year in Spain wasn't bad by most metrics, but it was quite a shock to the system for him, going from being the definition of the standout to sitting in a locker room with Xavi, Iniesta, Lionel Messi, Samuel Eto'o, Ronaldinho, Yaya Toure, Carles Puyol. Sorry, I was about to read out the entire squad, wasn't I? You get the idea. Not much happened in his first year, but in his second year, it was a whole different story. Now, I've told the story of Barcelona's incredible 2009 before, so I won't go into detail about it here. But long story short, Champions League, La Liga, Copa del Rey, UEFA Super Cup, FIFA Club World Cup, and a Supercopa de España. The sextuple. The first time in history that a club had accomplished such a feat. It's crazy. But going back to Henry individually, this season, the previous one, and the next one for that matter, were a change of pace for him. Like Bergkamp and others had done for him before, he had to quickly realize that he was not the main man anymore. He may have scored 26 goals in all competitions that year, but both Lionel Messi and Samuel Eto'o outscored him, by quite a bit too. Nonetheless, he was an important part of the system and more than deserved to be heralded as a hero within the winning party. In contrast to that, around the time he was being celebrated for his heroics with Barcelona, he was being vilified for a less than legitimate event with France. In a make-or-break matchup against the Republic of Ireland in the 2010 World Cup qualifiers, Henry handled the ball before William Gallas scored the goal that sent France to South Africa. This was probably the lowest period in terms of PR in the man's whole career. There were conversations around fair play. There was talk of unprecedented punishment for all those involved. The ref that officiated the match was getting so much backlash, he considered quitting only days after the incident. Henry himself felt the same way and was also on the verge of quitting. The whole situation was pretty crazy at the time. If I were Irish, I sure would have been pressed, so I get it. In the following weeks, for different reasons, things also weren't going so swimmingly at club level. With Pep Guardiola looking to freshen things up with a dynamic Pedro breaking through, Henry was first allotted less and less game time and then deemed surplus to requirements. He left the club in 2010 and ventured off to New York Red Bulls for the final chapter of his career. In 5 decent years with the club, he helped them to the first piece of major silverware in their history, winners of the regular MLS season in 2013. And in 2014, he retired from the game altogether and has since been in punditry and coaching. But before closing it all out, in the middle of all of this, there was a surprise for all of us to bear witness to. In January of 2012, during the MLS offseason, Arsenal were in need of attacking reinforcements after a few of their players went off to that year's AFCON. Wenger and Henry had an idea, a 2-month loan deal for all time's sake. I am not coming here to be a hero or anything. I'm just coming here to help. People have to understand that. Even if it's just 5 seconds, 1 second, or just talking in the dressing room, I will give my best, whatever it is. And in his second debut for Arsenal, he came on in the 68th minute, and...
Oh, through for Henry, what a moment! It just had to be Thierry Henry!
Now that is iconic. A couple games later and he was gone almost as quickly as he returned. But he left his mark all right. That final parting cameo was enough to make grown men cry. Thierry Henry was a guy who could do it all, a guy who had just about won it all, and above all else, an absolute bona fide legend. And there we have it. Honestly, if you gave me the chance, I could run my mouth about this guy all day. He's a major reason for why I really got into playing football and watching it for that matter. They actually used to call me a young Henry back in the day, but I did my hip a while back. It just hasn't been the same ever since. Let me know what you thought of the video. Feel free to follow me on all the socials. That is all for me today. I really hope you enjoyed. Hope you're having a good day, and cheers. I'll catch you in the next one.